We have bandit end Jared Bartlett. Questions for him?
Well, your senior day went pretty well. Talk about that and just your whole career here. What pretty good cap on at least from the home portion. You still got work to do, but let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. It was just a great experience. Before the game, just being kind of an emotional mind frame because like when I walked and I saw my family on the field and I shook Coach Brown's hand, I kind of got a flashback of all my time here, all the years I spent here, all the seasons, stuff like that, all the work I put in. It was pretty emotional. And then to cap that off with a dominant win over Cincinnati, it just felt really good. I'm happy. I'm proud of the time I spent with my guys. It's been a really good experience.
You know, in college careers, a lot of times guys will say, well, it just flew by like that. And it probably did, but in other ways with COVID and all those things, it seems like it's been forever in other ways, hasn't it?
It has. I wouldn't say it flew by. There's definitely a lot of defining moments in there where I felt like time was going a little bit slower than most people would say, but
yeah,
it's been quite a ride.
Yeah. Do you have another year?
I do.
All right. Anything about that yet? Or?
There's decisions I'll make later on, more focused on this week in the bowl game to come after that.
What do you think about those guys that play college football for 7 or 8 years? You know, you've heard these stories about these guys that are like almost 30 that have got this year or that. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, after a while, you gotta get on with your life, right?
Yeah. 7 or 8 years playing football, college football is pretty wild. Personally, I think that. But hey, if you love the sport and that's the opportunity to play it, do what you got to do.
At least NIL now helps that a little bit.
Yeah.
Jared, from a statistical standpoint, your game Saturday doesn't necessarily stand out, but both Neil and Coach Leslie were saying they thought it was maybe your best game of the year. Take us through how that happened. I mean, obviously they commended you a lot for fitting the run, but what went right for you specifically on Saturday?
I mean, a lot of times you can play a good game and not necessarily show up in the stat sheet. Doing your job, having leverage, being in the right spot in coverage. Although I might not be making the play, maybe I'm setting other guys up to be in position to make plays, things like that.
Is it easier to accept that now than maybe what it would have been a couple years ago, you know, now that you're, I guess, a little bit more experienced?
Yeah, because, I mean, every game's not going to be a National Player of the Week game, a Big 12 Player of the Week game. And you just got to accept that sometimes. I mean, yeah, I'd like to show up on the stat sheet a lot more, but at the end of the day, as long as we get the win, that's all that really matters.
You're out there playing, and you're doing your thing. You got your responsibilities, but everybody has their responsibilities in the defense. And you study it later. What do you see from a guy like Cutter, and how has he gotten better over the last, say, 3 or 4 weeks? What are you seeing from him?
I can see, like, from the first time that he played, I can see he's a lot more relaxed in the sense of his nerves, just reading his keys and stuff like that. That's very important, especially at a linebacker spot, not being too riled up. You got to see what you're essentially reading. I think he's really excelled at that. He can make calls now. There's a lot more confidence making his calls. I've seen a lot of growth from him.
You were in a similar situation. You played early in your career. I mean, there's a lot going on there that you probably, now you look back on it and go, wow, you know, I got through it, but do you see that from him? Do you help him out a little bit? Do you tell him?
Yeah, well, the thing is with him, I played 4 games my true freshman year. He's really been in a role where he's been playing a lot more. He played more games than I did. He's got guys like Lee next to him. He's got me next to him. That's why that confidence can really build and grow because he has guys that are older that can kind of lead him through that. My first year here, it was really the first year of this defense. So guys necessarily weren't as confident making the calls and stuff like that. So it's a completely different scenario, I feel like.
You guys were just kind of running around
until
you could figure out what was going on?
Yep.
Yeah.
What is your leadership strategy, I guess, as a veteran player in that situation when you have a guy like Cutter having to step up? Do you go to him and say this is what you have to do, or do you wait for him to come to you, or how do you go about it once that was going to be clear that you're going to have a freshman who's going to really be relied upon?
I mean, it's a mix of both. Since we don't necessarily play the exact same position, there's some things I'm not going to tell him. But because at the end of the day, it is his job to make a certain call based on what he sees. But if it's something that I clearly know is like maybe off, of course the guy's going to make some mistakes. He's a young guy. But I just want to be positive in the way that I approach him so he can take that advice that I give him or the advice that Lee gives him, and he can grow from that.
Ask Coach Leslie this, but what's Day-Day Hawkins like? Because it seems like he's having the time of his life nonstop.
Like as a person?
Yeah.
Exactly how it seems, yeah. He's a really energetic guy. I love Day. Really cool guy.
How much does that affect other people? I mean, even when you just have one guy who's positive or just always, never gets down, how much does that affect the whole defense?
That keeps the mood up. Juice and energy is very important, especially in the sport of football. When you have a low energy level coming out in games, that's how teams come out flat. That's how teams end up getting smacked in the mouth like first quarter, first play, and it's like, oh, what's going on? Why aren't we locked in, ready to play? Having dudes like that really gets the energy flowing and gets dudes ready to play.
Did he come in like?
Yeah, that's just who he is all the time. On the football field, in the meeting room, outside of here. That's just the type of guy he is.
Pattern for the defense has been, play okay or struggle a little bit, have a stretch where you play really well, and maybe struggle a little bit again, and now you're back on a stretch where you're playing pretty well. How do you smooth that out? How do you get that consistency where you're always doing that? Because for the most part you have, but there have been those instances, and I'm talking about the defense collectively, that have had some struggles. Why has that been, you think?
Well, the football season's a long season. At times, mistakes are going to be made. Adversity is just part of life, part of like playing football, the sport. It isn't necessarily why those things are happening. It's what you do to respond to that. And I feel like we've always responded really well throughout the season.
How do you build off that? You take this good performance. There was a stretch here where Cincinnati got nothing for, 4 or 5 series in a row. How do you build on that and continue that through to Baylor and then the bowl game?
Just repeating our best, repeating our technique, repeating what we do. We don't need to change anything, like as far as our mindset. We base our defense off effort, aggression, and playing together, and that's all we got to do to repeat that.
Are you one of those guys that will go back and say, dang, we would have just done this against Houston, or we would have done this against Oklahoma State in the fourth quarter? Things could be considerably different. Are you one of those guys?
Well, it's hard to say nobody thinks about that. I try not to think about that as much, but it's kind of hard. But you can't live in the past. Regrets are doing nothing but holding you back at the end of the day, so, yeah. All right, thank y'all.